All right, Jared, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to have you on. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Alex. How you doing?
I'm not bad. I'm not bad. I'm excited to have you on because of all the people I've had on the podcast, I think I've frequented your business more than anybody else's. So I'm excited to hear all about it. And like I say in every episode now, I think the best way to kind of start the episode of the podcast is actually for my guests to actually introduce themselves rather than me. I have a real habit of botching the introductions or half explaining what makes that person great. So I'd rather have you explain yourself and let you explain it. We'll dive in from there. So everybody, this is Jared Doob.
That's right. Jared Doob. I am the VP of Operations for a company called Good Food Guys. We've got two brands underneath us, both MIXT and Split. MIXT is a fast casual salad restaurant concept. And Split is more of your comfort food, fried chicken sandwiches, burgers. We have some salads on the menu, but for the most part, like you had mentioned pre-podcast, Alex, it is very kind of hangover type food, comfort food.
Quality hangover food.
That's right. That's right.
And yeah, so sorry. Should I keep introducing yourself there, or did you stop?
Sure. I've been in the industry now since the early 90s and all here in the Bay Area and have had a blast. Started off after I got out of college at UC Davis. I was a classical civilization major, and I thought, what the heck am I going to do with that? So I went back to doing what I love to do, which was cooking. Went to the San Francisco Culinary Academy. And then after that, just kind of worked my way through lots of different restaurants, lots of different chefs, different positions, and eventually ended up here. And I love it.
That's awesome. And one of the things I definitely hear from everybody is like everybody's always a lifer. Like that, I guess everybody who's on this podcast is relatively successful in their job. You know what I mean? They've had great careers. And one of the things that I think cuts a lot of them, or that runs across all of them, is the fact that most of them are lifers in the industry. And most of them have some sort of food bug in them, whether they grew up in restaurants, whether like you, like went to cooking school, culinary school. Like there's always something there that the sign was always there, and I guess you have it in you as well. Like, how did, say, going to culinary school impact how you got into the food business in the sense that you're in operations now, for example?
Yeah, it was, I guess culinary school was kind of my gateway drug, right? Cooking was something that I always loved to do as a kid and growing up, and I never really thought that I would make a career out of it. I didn't really think much into that at all. My family is very kind of educated, school focused, business focused. So I was going more towards the kind of lawyer, doctor, that kind of route, and realized that I'm not going to have any fun doing that. So went back to what I love to do, which was cooking, and really kind of found that out more at culinary school and realized that this is what I want to do. I love the people that are working in the industry. I love the feel of the industry. I love cooking. I love food. And that's kind of the path that I started going down. Was a line cook for a while, and when I thought I can be the best line cook anywhere in the city, it's time to do the next step. And so then I was a sous chef, and then I thought I can be the best sous chef anywhere in the city. So what's the next step? Executive chef. So I kept on doing that with that kind of mentality. I didn't want to rise up too quickly or take something that was too big for me to chew on. So always waited until I thought, all right, I've conquered this land. Now now let's go to the next level.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I've had some people on the podcast that were former executive chefs that have found their way into sort of operations. And I'm curious, like, what was your sort of inflection point when you knew, like, kind of over being the executive chef and I'm very ready for like the operations?
Yeah, it was always a facet of the industry that really appealed to me, which was more kind of the strategic thought process and really diving in deep to financials and just the menu layout and engineering and all of that. So that was always something that I really enjoyed about the food industry itself and working as an executive chef. When my son was born back in 2007, I wanted to get into still be in the industry, but be in a place where I could spend more time with him as he was growing up. I didn't want to sacrifice that. So I jumped into corporate food service with the intention that I was going to be part of their kind of culinary training department. In going through that interview process, they had mentioned that they had a few area manager positions open. So I jumped in on that, and that kind of took me more to the kind of corporate side, more the management side. And I realized that I really did enjoy it. I thoroughly miss being in the kitchen, and I still do. As you can go into any of my restaurants and you can talk to them, and they'll tell you, oh, they always have to kick me out of the kitchen. But I love being back there. It's a young man's game, though. I don't think I have it in me anymore. But really kind of stayed on this path through area manager and director level, and now VP.
And so I guess one of the things that we spoke with is offline, but like I guess like the challenges of doing business in San Francisco as well. Because would the majority of all the mixed locations be in the Bay Area, or are they all in the Bay Area, or where do you find the majority?
Yeah, the majority are here in the Bay Area. We've got a few stores down in LA. We also have a store in Dallas and in Scottsdale. So primarily here, Bay Area.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I mean, like the Bay Area is like the most expensive place on the planet basically to live, I would say. I mean, nowhere geographically spreads out as much as the Bay Area in terms of expense. Like people say New York City is an expensive place, but you can get out of there pretty quickly, you know what I mean, into areas that are not like in California or in the Bay Area. And I'm always curious, like when you think of like challenges, there's a lot of stores, like 20 stores you'd mentioned, like one of the things I always think of, especially when I talk to people in the Bay Area, is obviously like hiring, because it's a very unique challenge to the Bay Area in a non-unique setting. And what I mean by that is everyone has hiring problems in every restaurant or every hotel or in every business I speak to. The challenge exists and it's worse than ever. And so, like, I'm curious your take on, the job industry, so to speak, from a sort of Bay Area perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting, Alex, where when I came on board to MIXT, it was right before the pandemic hit. And we were in a very big push to open new stores.
Yeah.
Where we were as a company, we were a small company that was just on the verge of being something more. Yeah. And so when I came on board, there was a lot of opportunity to revise our SOPs, revise our toolbox, revise our systems and tools, to really make the whole company a little bit more efficient and to make sure that we had the right people to go to that next level. And at that point, we probably didn't. And it was much harder to think about expanding and growing when I first joined with the company than it is now. And, the COVID years were brutal, right? Yeah. They were brutal for everybody. We had to shut a lot of stores down. We had to reduce our workforce by a substantial amount. Yeah. We had to make some tough decisions. It's never easy when you have to do that. It's never fun. But luckily for us, we came out on the other side. And not only did we reopen all the stores that we closed, but we were able to really kind of fine tune our toolbox so that when we did come out on the other side, we came out in a much better spot.
Yeah.
And part of doing that was revising our training programs to the point where I hate hiring from without. I hate going through the interview process. I hate everything about it. The unknown of what type of person that you're going to get. It's just not, it's not what we want to do.
Yeah.
So I kind of made a vow to myself and to this company that any position that we have, we are going to rise from within. Right? Of course, we're going to hire for the kind of basic positions, the hourly positions, the dishwashers, some of the salad chef, this or that. But any leads, any MIT manager in training, any general managers, any area managers, those are all positions that we are now going through internal growth methods and training practices. And it's working out tremendously for us.
Yeah.
You know, that said, we are now on the other side of COVID and we're back into our heavy growth phase. So we're looking at opening more stores. And the challenge that we're having now is our bench big enough, right?
Yeah.
Do we have enough people waiting on the sidelines to jump into those leadership positions as we open up our new stores? Right now we do, but it's going to get pretty slim and pretty challenging. So we're really working hard with our general managers on training up people, identifying people, using kind of our 9 square charts to identify performance and
Yeah.
high potential people. So that's kind of where we're at now.
It's interesting. I mean, it's amazing you brought it up yourself in the sense that I sometimes have to like wrangle that out of people. You know, it's like, what are you doing to like look at talent as a sort of future forward business need? And what I mean by that wishy-washy way of phrasing that is that like it's so hard to hire people now that and the demands of modern sort of restaurant hospitality employees have kind of changed post COVID that it's almost like they've awakened to like wanting and demanding and asking for better benefits in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're now asking for them in a way that all the privileged tech people in San Francisco are like, it's just expected. And so with that, like what I've seen is like, and especially like I've been almost 2 years at Landed doing this. First, I remember when I got here, it was like top of funnel, like we need to fill it. And say that was back end of 2021, 2022. So like you can imagine we're kind of coming out of that post-COVID year. And it's like new stores were like on the rise. Then it became, we actually need quality people. Like we've filled up our top one. Now we just want quality. We need to filter this down. And then it became actually no retention and a question about how do I keep the people I have, because it is so hard to replace the good ones that we need to do everything we can to keep them, which is like where a lot of times in my podcast I end up talking about with people is like, what do you do to keep the staff? And it's interesting that you bring it up yourself because I have to like kind of sometimes get it out of people. You know, some companies have very formal programs, others don't. Others have recently developed them since COVID. Others had them pre-COVID. But I think the kind of big signal for companies that are really your size and above, like when you're at multiple locations, like 20 and above, like I think what separates kind of like the good from great in that context is having a very strong program for leadership development in your frontline staff to give them the opportunity to grow. Because I think like benefits are benefits, like you do a 401k match or you do like pet insurance, people they're fine. They're like one and done, forgotten, you know what I mean? And I definitely get that impression. But when it comes to training, I'm just so like, I think that's a real key offer to really sustain long-term sort of retention of folks, you know, and build out your bench, so to speak.
For sure. And you know, what you're talking about is kind of Maslow's pyramid, right? You've got the base level, which is, can I just survive, right? Do I have a job? Am I getting paid? You know, and so many people kind of stay at that level. And when those people drop off, they hire new ones and replace them. But there's no room or thought about how to get to those higher levels. And that's what I'm really challenging our team to do is how do we bring the teamwork aspects into it? How do we bring the culture aspects into it so that people realize that this is more than just a paycheck and more than just a job. This can be their future. This can be
Yes.
their career. This can be a means to something that they haven't seen in their lives before. And we want to make that possible for them. And we've got all the tools to do so. We just have to find the right people that have that desire.
Okay, so desire. Okay, cool. That leads into my next one. How do you identify that kind of talent?
It's tough. I think that a lot of people have that desire in them, and it takes the right environment for it to come out. And if you cultivate that environment, if you show people that, yes, there is a path forward here, you're not going to be stuck at dishwasher or prep cooks. You work hard. Here is the path. In every one of our stores on the wall, we have our path of development poster on there, so people can actually see what's the next step. How do I get there?
Yeah.
They can see the different promotions that we have going on within our company, our internal promotions on our recognition channel on Slack that
Yeah.
everybody's on, right? So they can see all of this stuff happening. And it's just like, they think, I can do that. Why isn't that me? I want to be next. We make such a big deal about it that it's fun. Let's do it.
So it sounds like, and again, you've kind of mentioned something that I think is super important, which is like communication, strong communication. Like it sounds to me like you guys internally are very keen on like communicating essentially the mission, the values, and the opportunities that the business offers itself.
For sure. For sure. I think cascading of our communication is a huge aspect of what we do and how we get that word out there. And whether it is individual one-on-ones between our general managers and their leads, it's the daily circle ups that happen before every shift. It's the community board that we have up there that has what's going on within our company, what are the special events, celebrating birthdays, that kind of stuff, but still kind of bringing everybody together. It's our general manager meetings that we have on a bi-weekly basis. It's all these different pieces that when you put them together, complete this puzzle of keeping people, retention, development, growth, all of that.
Yeah, it's something. And I mean, obviously, the retention part is just so critical. That's what I mean. It's something. But I'm curious, okay, so of the new stores that you're looking to open, okay, like it's a majority of your staff are in San Francisco. Is say pitching up in like Houston, Texas this time, for example, or
Yeah.
another city, you're like, who wants it? Is that gonna how does it work? Are you guys putting like feet in the ground to the areas that you're going to find out, suss out if there are good GMs in those kinds of locations? Because let me tell you, Dallas ain't a close flight to San Francisco.
Yeah, and we really struggled with that problem when we opened up Scottsdale and when we opened up Dallas, right?
Yeah.
Those were two brand new markets for us that were not just down the block.
Yeah.
And it was difficult. And so we're really kind of focusing now on slowly expanding our footprint, not, picking stores that are way over here and way over there, but maybe a little bit off of here and then a little bit more and a little bit more. So we can pull from the other stores and use the resources that we have, not only for training, but for populating the stores as well. And do kind of what you're talking about of making sure that we have that bench that can move with us as we grow.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're in that very interesting inflection point, because you've got a lot of locations, but there's so much scope for more. Like
Yeah.
if you were at like 100 locations, it's like realistically, how many locations more could you have? I know some, thousands and hundreds. There's an escape velocity, but you know what I mean in the sense that like you're at that like kind of point where it's like you guys can really double down and really kind of go for it over 18 months, 24 months. You know what I mean? Where like a lot of new locations can kind of come on board. If that number is available in your mind, like how many more stores do you think that you guys might have over the next 48 months, 24 months, say?
I don't know. We'll see. We've got
Yeah.
we've got feelers out there, and we've got different LOIs for different locations, even as we speak. So it kind of depends on what comes through for us.
Yeah.
We definitely have the ability to really look for those A+ type locations and
Yeah.
not have to settle for something that we don't really want. Um, so if we do it right, I think it's a handful of stores within the next 18 months. And then obviously as we keep growing, we have to keep growing our infrastructure too.
Yeah.
So when that happens, we'll see how quickly we can move.
That's awesome. I mean, that makes me very happy as a loyal Mix customer to know that there are many
Yeah.
more. There are many more
Yeah.
coming.
I don't know. I don't know what the timeline is for us getting out to New York, Alex, but
Well, I might have to go. I
we'll
might come
see.
back. I might come back.
Uh-huh.
But it's interesting. You talk about developing infrastructure because I think that's a kind of nice little kind of. See, I run this conversation off things you say.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
But you talk about infrastructure again because, I mean, let's just take COVID. COVID was I mean, I don't want to say it was brilliant because obviously it was traumatic for everybody, in particular frontline staff. But what I mean by brilliant is it kind of grabbed hospitality literally by the collar. Imagine grabbing like an American footballer and grabbing him by the collar and like throwing them. That's kind of what COVID did to the industry in the sense that like literally overnight, you had all those little parklets pop up on Fillmore Street and on Union Street and all the way down Polk. Every restaurant had opened a little outdoor thing. What did it do to curbside? What did it do to third party? What did it do to the inside of the store? What did it do to like staff morale? Like so many things happened. So when I think of infrastructure, I'm curious, like the evolution of the infrastructure perspective that you've had since COVID and how you see infrastructure scaling into the future.
Yeah, it was almost the evolution of infrastructure during COVID, right? Because everything collapsed. We no longer needed the amount of stores that we had. We no longer needed the amount of hourly team members that we had. We no longer needed the amount of corporate support that we have. And so our beautiful training department went away.
Yeah.
Our great NRO department, gone. Our multiple people who handle customer service, gone. So a lot of that kind of morphed into people having a lot of different hats.
Yeah.
And so now, as we're on the other side and we're starting to grow again, we can be very strategic about, okay, how do we and when do we bring in these pieces that we know that we're going to need? We know if we're going to open up multiple stores, we're going to need some sort of NRO department. It can't just be me. It can't just be the area managers that we have. We got to have some sort of new restaurant opening team that not only works here at the corporate office to make sure that everything's set, but that we can also send to help train with the new stores and make sure that everything's flawless. We know that we're going to need a training department. Our training capabilities with what we have now only go so far. So we know as we grow, these things are going to have to happen, but we don't want to bring them on too early because we're still suffering the effect of everything that happened through COVID. So we don't have the endless financial means to have these departments that we don't necessarily need right now.
Yeah.
So that's the real piece is when do we bring these on and in what capacity are they going to look like when we do bring them on?
Totally. And I mean, it is encouraging as well. Like, I mean, that, going through that sort of very extreme lean period for the business during COVID and retaining the staff you have, you've now turned them into like absolute weapons. You know what I mean? You can throw them on problems where they probably weren't comfortable with dealing with certain things or had to be trained up or had to have their hand hold it now or just like comfortable with that type of flexibility. I think a lot about there's a great actually Bay Area. An old boss of mine, and she wrote a very good article. I sent it to you. It's called "Giving Away Your Legos and Other Startup Commandments," and of course, how very tech, But in it talks about like giving away your Legos, and basically, like as a kid, you don't want to give away your Legos because you're like, it's almost like a sign of like immaturity. Share your Legos with your brothers and sisters. Yeah. But if you think about it in a workplace context, like you hire somebody for a job, and it's like I hire you as chef. Okay. that implies that like you only do chef roles. But if the business needs you to bake some bread or bake a cake, and you're like, no, I do chef, it's like,
Right.
yeah, like, but we need you to do that. It's like, how do you identify that in people that are like willing to understand that the nature of the company and the nature of the role, especially in a growing business, that your role will change and you need to change with it and feel comfortable giving elements of your job spec away, like being comfortable with this sort of change. And I think about that a lot. And I feel like very successful kind of companies that have come out of COVID, like that have kind of survived and begun to thrive, have really focused, like in the sense that like they now have so many arsenals in a way that didn't exist before. Because if you think about it,
Yeah.
it just makes so much sense. Like I've had people on here that were like, I was in like guys who aren't bakers or like aren't chefs that were like, I was in the kitchen like chopping onions. You know what I mean? Like people were like throwing everything at it because people call out sick or people, get failing a test and they can't come in. And you're like, I need somebody to chop these onions.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, did you have any experience like that during COVID where like it was like, the business was still open. It was like an online business, but you still had to like get the
Yeah.
food out somehow.
For sure. For sure. And, those were the people that still were employed by the larger corporations during COVID,
Yeah.
right? Because you had to wear different hats. You had to do these things that pushed you out of your comfort zone a little bit, that kind of expanded the parameters of what your um, work description was, your job description was. You had to do that during COVID because there wasn't anybody else. And
Yeah.
if you weren't willing to do that, then the guy sitting next to you would be doing it. And so,
Yeah.
and you'd find yourself, nothing against being an Uber driver, but you'd find yourself being an Uber driver because there wouldn't be anything for you to do. And so, yeah, I think coming out of COVID on this side now, we have got a lot of people in key positions who are comfortable with doing a lot of different things. And I think if you looked at our job descriptions pre-COVID and our job descriptions post-COVID, there is a lot more of an expanded kind of scope
Yeah.
of what jobs entail now than there was before.
So
So
interesting you say that. Oh, sorry, go on.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's interesting you say the expanded scope of the jobs because I hear that a lot from people when they talk about the GM in the restaurant, for example, that now the GM is basically like this kind of quasi super quarterback almost that needs to understand
Yeah.
P&Ls and data and hospitality and have the gift of the gab and all these other things to fall in to make a great GM. Have you seen that kind of role in particular change? Like, or is it just basically every type of job spec? But I'm particularly keen on your opinion on the GM, the role of the GM in the modern day.
Yeah, I think all jobs change that way, but definitely with our GM. And our GMs in this kind of quick service model have always somewhat been like that, right?
Yeah.
We don't have necessarily a back of house chef and a front of house GM. Our GMs kind of encapsulate both of those, and they always have. What we did fine tune throughout the years of COVID and everything that went with that was kind of their understanding of their store financials and more of the complete store ownership piece, where I don't know if we really had that before. They were the GM of a store, but did they really own the store? Did they really own those financial results? Could they really be held accountable for those things? Probably not, but for sure they are now. And they definitely have that understanding and they have that interest in it. And they really care about it. They want to know what their customer care scores were for the week. They want to know what their P&Ls look like. They see that and they understand that to a much higher degree than they did before.
Yeah, and that's something, and it goes back to your training question as well, or your training sort of ideology, which is like, it's a life of learning. And if you're willing to offer people that opportunity, presumably to graduate into the sort of desirable sort of GM that you want, there are certain things that you need to upskill people on. And then obviously the GM to area director or whatever the sort of pathway is. there are certain things that need to be trained on and to get very nuanced on. And I guess like that's all these different kind of skills. But I mean, you've been in the restaurant business over 20 years now. Like that role is night and day a different job now. I mean, like I would imagine, or you're kind of looking at me going, well, I don't know, it's gonna say, but am I way off base?
No, it sure is. I think it is a night. It has been a night and day difference. The whole industry has been a night and day difference from when I started out to where it is now. It's just the way that people act and interact with each other in the kitchen. It's the type of food that is coming out and the different trends that are going on, different training programs, what people value now in terms of whether it's compensation or time off or flexible schedules or childcare or whatever the case might be. It seems like everything has changed and evolved, and you definitely have to keep your finger on top of it to
Yeah.
make sure that you are providing people with what they want rather than what you think they want.
It's interesting. Okay, so like I had somebody on recently, and they were saying like before COVID, there's like revenue from online offline was say 70% offline, 30% online, and overnight until today it's like 30% offline and now 70% online. And given you're such a Bay Area centric business, you have a store for everyone listening. I think probably the nicest area in the city. Do you call it Kahalo or would you call it the Marina? Because it's not technically in the Marina, is it?
Yeah, we call it Cow Hollow.
Kahalo, yeah. In Kahalo. So you got the interference area there. And like ultimately, like I mean, it's an insanely digitally savvy place. I mean,
For sure.
I'm here in New York now, and I'm like, not as I feel like almost like, oh, it's kind of different here. Not everyone's obsessed with their phone in a way that in San Francisco, like everybody is. And so I'm curious, did the model like for you guys? This is obviously one of the last questions, by the way. Just I'm curious here now that we're here. I have so many questions for you. Did the model change a lot? Like, did it look like okay, now you're more of an online business than offline in a way that it wasn't before, or like how has that kind of changed and evolved for you since COVID?
Of course. I mean, it changed dramatically. You went from not only having a bunch of open stores with a lot of conventions in town and a lot of people walking on the streets and coming in your stores, and very rarely were you seeing any third party business, to all of a sudden our financial district was a ghost town.
Yeah,
I mean, there was nobody walking in the streets. There was nobody doing anything outside. They were all
yeah,
working from home. Our financial district stores and what we call our neighborhood stores completely flip-flopped in terms of their sales, because everybody's working in their neighborhoods now and no longer down in the financial districts. And of course, nobody wants to be outside, and all the third parties just exploded, which was a um, completely new and different challenge that we had to deal with in terms of what's that look like in the stores. What kind of infrastructure within the stores do we need to have? Now all of our stores are being built with a secondary make line that
yeah.
just focuses on our third party business, while we can have our other store team members focusing on people coming in off the street and our walk-ins. So it's completely flipped it on its head. Um, I've got different feelings about it, which might be for another podcast.
Well, I've had very candid people tell me. I had the CEO of Shuck and Shack say they've completely rejected third party, and they're
Yeah,
in like South Carolina, that kind of area there. And he's like, we don't do any third party whatsoever. We do curbside pickup if you call us, but we don't do any third party. And then I
yeah,
had the CEO of East Coast Subs on, and he said to me that their big goal for 2024 is to absolutely nail the in-store experience again now. That like we've kind of made it easy to blame nobody for the quality of food anymore. So we just have kind of
yeah,
less good food now, like in the sense that it comes out of the restaurant and then goes on a guy's moped and then it finds its way to you. And it's like, this salad is gonna, warm like soppy, or like this sandwich is kind of soggy, or you know what I mean? Like in the sense that like, he was saying to me that like, when you open our Subway, that you want the fumes to come off in your face in the store.
yeah.
And I was like, that's just a great way of describing it. But he's like, that's their thing now, is to nail that this year. And so I think about that a lot, just in terms of like the attitude towards third party. I think is swinging back again now. I think a lot of the loyalty apps and a lot of ways like it can be kind of owned itself, and you have like someone like Domino's that's now getting to third party because they can't find drivers. So there's this weird kind of battle with wins and losses for everybody ever with third party. But I think like, the customer one is like one of these ones that's like kind of almost right. But I think what I think is an antidote to a lot of this is probably a lot of like really solid like loyalty programs. I think like that helps a lot with, I think, figuring out how to use like delivery. I feel like lots of companies that talk to me about the loyalty program emphasize the delivery side of it, that you like rewarded for ordering deliveries over third party. But
For sure.
I have hot takes on it as well. I mean, I could talk forever. So I'd rather you hear what I said there and say what do you think, rather than making it all about me and my hot takes.
No, I mean, we definitely have a great user-friendly app, and we definitely try and move people away from the third parties and to use our online ordering platforms
Yeah.
within our own means. But it's not something that you can ignore or turn off or say you don't want to do it. It's part of it now. And so you have to realize and have to figure out a way to accommodate those third parties while also still trying to do what you want to do. And it's funny that you had mentioned one of your other guests who was kind of focusing on that in-store experience. That's exactly what we're doing this year too, is really focusing on hospitality training and making that in-store experience what it needs to be again, because it was just forgotten about for a few years, right? Because nobody was in store.
Totally. And I think again, it's interesting because it seems to me like in San Francisco as well, there's not that many like QSRs, and like outside of like say Fisherman's Wharf and like that weird part near Golden Gate Park where like that McDonald's drive-through is. I'm trying to think of areas that even they exist. You know what I mean? You see like lots of kind of clustering of them. So it's like it's interesting to think like, I'm actually not even sure what kind of point I'm making, but I'm sure I'm making a point about San Francisco. Just like the added difficulty that you have. Just like San Francisco just beating you down. It sounds like amazing.
Right.
So I love San Francisco. I miss it. Although I don't miss the traffic on my road on Broadway, which I wish I knew when I moved in there. I moved in there during COVID deal. It was the day when the sky went orange. Do you remember when we were all there? It's like September or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this place is so quiet. It's like, there's not a car. Didn't realize that all these old buildings had such like basically shitty windows, and it was the loudest, all those, because they have no more cops in the tunnel. So like it was all those like rowdy dirt bikes and rowdy Harley Davidsons and everyone speeding through that tunnel. I'm like, I live next to that.
And when you drive through the tunnel, you have to honk. It's
every time
things you have to do.
Every time. Well, Jared, I know we're coming up on time. So the one thing I ask everybody at the end of the podcast that throws everyone just into a hoop. So I'm going to throw you into a hoop now. So you ready for this?
I'm ready.
You're like, oh God. So the audience for this are your peers. Okay, like people like you listen to this podcast, I hope. And that's what I expect. That's what the data says. And what advice would you give them? I ask everybody that vague, open-ended question.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what. I'm sorry, one second. Okay, I think it's kind of what we were talking about earlier, is really look internal, and that's where you're going to find those diamonds in the rough. That's where you're going to find your gems. And if you can focus on your internal training, your internal growth and development plans, that's really where you can rest the future of your stores on. And figuring out how to do that and figuring out how to identify those people is tricky, and it's probably different in every location and in every different type of concept. And I'll let your listeners try and figure out how to do that themselves. But luckily, we've been able to crack that code, and it's really made a difference for us.
Nice. Well, hopefully people are not come and ask me about that, and then I can go finagle an answer to you. Jared, man, thanks so much for coming on. This was fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. It has been fun.